I get asked quite often how to get into Warhammer 40k, from not only just the hobbying side of it, the model collecting, the painting, the building, and eventually the playing of the difficult to master, difficult to grasp in some ways, tabletop game, but also getting into the Warhammer 40k lore. This Polygon article was brought to my attention by good old John T over on my Discord. And I don't want to rag on it too much, so I hate to shit on other people's work and stuff, but it's the 8 best video games to get you into Warhammer 40k. And I have issues with this. Let's talk about some of their picks, and there's some things that I think they've missed quite glaringly, and some of the issues with the stuff they've picked too. Their first pick is Space Hulk Deathwing Enhanced Edition. I recently played a couple of hours of this, because I'm trying to play every single video game that's ever been made on Warhammer 40k, so I can make videos about them, and guides kind of like this. Space Hulk is, how do I put this politely? Shit. Deathwing is just not good. It is fucking boring. I played a few hours of Deathwing recently, so I'm trying to play every single Warhammer video game to have ever existed, so I can do a video on all of them, listing literally every single one and an opinion on each one, so you don't have to. I also want to do some deep dives on some of these games too. Fire Warrior, perhaps Space Hulk 2, all the FPSs especially. Space Hulk is boring. It's really, really boring. It's not quite a Left 4 Dead clone because it doesn't have the frantic action that Left 4 Dead has, but it's a co-op shooter against a horde-like enemy with special elites and similar. There are some elements to locking off doors and setting up the map for later incursions against like waves of enemies that is akin to the action of the board game Space Hulk, from which it takes its name. But the Polygon article does talk about Space Hulks being monolithic like conglomerations of spaceships trapped in the warp that have been warped by the chaos magics of the warp. But in reality, Space Hulk Deathwing, at least for the first few hours, I mean, maybe it changes drastically towards the end, but it's very much based off the board game, which is fine. The board game is much beloved, but you're playing Terminators fighting Tyranids. The demons aboard the ship and the warped, chaotic nature of it all is kind of not there. The environments are okay, I guess. The game looks okay at a glance. The longer I spent in it though, the more muddy and dirty the whole thing just felt, in a sense that everything blurred together. I need to give the game more of a chance, but I would not recommend it to be your intro to Warhammer 40k. The game is slow, plodding, boring, and I'll be honest, quite unpolished. If we want to look at flawed gems and you want to get the architecture, to get the idea and the understanding of the scale of Warhammer 40k, I'd much prefer to issue a recommendation for Necromunda Hired Gun. Necromunda isn't technically 40k in the sense that it's not Warhammer 40k. There are no Space Marines in this game, except for, I think there's some statues actually. But it's set in the world of Warhammer 40k. Necromunda is a hive world. These are the places where normal humans like you and me live, where billions of people live in a big, horrible, shitty city. You play as a ganger who gets to run around and shoot and be a gang member. Basically, the storyline kind of sucks, but the environmental design is gorgeous. It really, really strongly evokes all sorts of elements of the tabletop war game and its aesthetic principles. Meanwhile, it's a reasonable Doom come Titanfall 2 clone, where you've got a lot of movement, you slide, you wall run, you triple jump. It's fucking mad and frantic, and it's actually very enjoyable and fun. The spectacle is there. Next up on the recommended is Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitor Martyr. That's an interesting advert for the Doo-Doo Lovables. Anyway, can't tell I've got a child on the way and the internet knows what I'm up to. Warhammer 40,000 Inquisitor Martyr is a Diablo clone. And I say Diablo clone, I use the term loosely. I played this back when it launched and it was not good back then, but I've heard things about it getting better. I can't shit on this as being an option to introduce someone to it if you want an isometric top-down action RPG. I need to revisit this. I don't think this is a bad recommendation. However, they absolutely failed to mention the other isometric RPG out later this year, which is Rogue Trader. It's not the action RPG, so it's not like Diablo. It's more of an isometric story-based narrative decision kind of RPG. So talking your Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale's a bad example, Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, your Pathfinder games. The alpha is available right now, and character creation isn't in there. I've been playing a little bit of it. I plan to make a video about it when it's just a bit more feature-rich. But not mentioning this is a weird one because it's actually got so much breadth in terms of what it talks about and gets involved with in the Warhammer 40k canon. We have party members that are Psychers, Space Marines. I think there's an Eldar party member that's been teased. And one of the main bad guys is going to be the Word Bearers, Chaos Space Marines, something we don't see a lot of in video games. I think we're really, really missing out if we're not telling people about Rogue Trader that's coming. Then they're on to Warhammer 40,000 Chaos Gate. They're recommending a game from like 25 years ago or some shit. They're telling you to go on Good Old Games, and I'm wondering if this is just ticking a box for recommending Good Old Games as part of the Polygon's association with them. But Chaos Gate is ancient, to the point that it's borderline inaccessible to modern players. They even mentioned that Chaos Gate recently got a pseudo-sequel in Chaos Gate Daemon Hunters, which is actually really fucking good. The game is a tad repetitive, and there are some weird elements around difficulty levels that you could get into the weeds on and argue makes the game a lot worse than it could be, but ultimately it looks the part, it plays solid, and it's a great, essentially XCOM clone in the Warhammer 40k universe. You play as the Grey Knights. They're the psychic space marines, they are the secret agent space marines that no one's meant to know exist, and you're going around a sector trying to stomp down upon the infection of Nurgle. Nurgle's the chaos god of disease and death and rebirth, and basically he's the main villain of the majority of 40k video games, it seems, in the recent time. Both 8th edition tabletop also had the Death God as the main bad guys, but both this and Darktide both have Nurgle for some reason, and no other chaos, which is a shame. You do see a bloodthirsty in the intro though. Either way, if you like XCOM and tactical based hex grid combat, you need to play this. It is genuinely very good. Recommending the old one is a strange place to be. It does give you some retro nostalgia, I guess, but I don't think modern audiences are they're not gonna enjoy this. Next up is Battlefleet Gothic Armada 2. I spent half an hour with this. It's so fucking boring, but this does come down to personal taste. I do understand that it's just not for me. I've never really enjoyed Space Fleet combat games outside of Star Trek Bridge Commander. Battlefleet Gothic does give you a perspective that a lot of the other games don't give, but again, if you are not into space-based combat, and I don't mean like fighter space-based, I'm not talking fucking Elite Dangerous here, I'm talking basically turn-based borderline because it's so fucking slow, big ship combat. If you're not into that, and you haven't got the patience, this is not going to get you into the canon or the setting. Instead, I'm going to throw out another one that they just failed to mention here, which is Blood, Teeth, and Shooters. This is a side-scrolling shmup. It is a rhythm action game in some of the boss sequences, like most shmups are, you recognise patterns and have to beat through them. You're side-scrolling, you're playing as an orc, and you're collecting guns, and you are shooting the shit out of people, and it really captures the humorous tone of the orcs as comic relief in this environment. The whole storyline is based around the main orc that you play as being angry that his sentient toupee was stolen by another orc, so you're on a rampage through an Imperial sector trying to get your hair back. Much like every game on this list, it is far from perfect, but it scratches such an itch that no other game on this list does. Side-scrolling shoot-em-ups or shmups, they absolutely lend themselves to this setting. I'm surprised there isn't a really macho, over-the-top, overzealous Space Marine version of this. I would love them to do that. They've then got Space Hulk Tactics on here, which is, I haven't touched this yet, but I've heard it's not good. Turn-based approximation of the Space Hulk board game, but We'll go to the least controversial picks now. Warhammer 40k Space Marine is still pretty good by today's standards. It's like 10 years old at this point, and the sequel is coming out this year, so it's definitely worth picking up and sort of getting into the understanding of what it is to be a Space Marine. It is a tad repetitive in terms of the combat, but the setting is great. The animations stand up very well. Even graphically, it doesn't look terrible for a 10-year-old game. I actually would recommend Space Marine as probably your first stop if you're into action, adventure, first-person shooter, third-person shooter combat games, and you want to play in 40k. They also recommend Warhammer Dawn of War 2, Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 2, which I'm actually all on board for. I can get behind you on this one. The first Dawn of War is an RTS base builder in the vein of StarCraft and Command and Conquer, where you have to capture objective points on the battlefield. I guess is one of the unique elements to it to gain resources. And then you also have its standout thing back in the day was synced animation. So if a dreadnought killed someone, they would sync and grab the monster, the bad guy, and pick him up and tear him in half and shit. And that's just not even, you play it now and you forget that that was a unique selling point at the time. Nothing else had that at the time. It had multiple expansion packs, including Dark Crusade, which I never had as a kid, but is heralded as one of the best Warhammer 40k experiences you can have in a video game. However, I don't think it's aged that well, so if you haven't got a nostalgia for Dawn of War, I don't know if you can go back and just play Dark Crusade. It's got like a Risk-style map, but it doesn't live up to the Total War games in the depth that you get out of those, and the play-by-play, battle-by-battle, real-time strategy thing, having to build a base and come back to that base and stuff. I don't know, it's not as compelling as I remember as a kid. Dawn of War 2, on the other hand, is, again by Relic, but they totally and utterly ripped off their own formula of Company of Heroes. I say ripped off. They leaned heavily into some of the elements they learnt with Company of Heroes. So you can get into cover, you can destroy the terrain around you to create cover, but they shrunk down the scale. You are sending only a handful of units into each battle. Each one has an RPG, like tech tree, and items you can equip with like sort of looter gear elements to each mission. It's got a very action RPG element to it. It's borderline not a real-time strategy game at that point. It feels almost like proto-MOBA, which is ironic because Dawn of War 3 feels very MOBA as well. I think Dawn of War 2 is the best one of a lot of them, and has a cool co-op horde mode as well, because every co-op mode elevates every game, right? Like Space Hulk is probably fun if you play it with like a handful of friends, but then again, I could take a shit in my own mouth, and it'd probably be fun if I had friends watching and laughing along the way. Something they didn't touch upon is any of the card game versions of 40k. There's combat cards that I don't think is very good. Legions I love. It's basically Hearthstone / Magic, but in the Warhammer 30k. And they've got Warforged coming out later in the year. I've done sponsored videos with them, but I genuinely am excited for this product. I want a good digital competitive card game based in Warhammer, and I think they're going to deliver that. Opinion pending on their monetization system, of course. And then lastly, Polygon are recommending Darktide, and I can't not recommend Darktide. The biggest issue with Darktide, though, that I spoke about extensively in my like preview, review, first impressions, first 10 hours with it, is that it came out unfinished. It focused on cosmetics that are purchasable with real world money, with the normal cosmetics being shit. There's a repetitive nature to there only being a handful of maps, a handful of missions. That kind of slid when we played Left 4 Dead fucking 15 years ago, but Left 4 Dead clones now need to put out a bit more than that. And the bosses too, there's only a handful of bosses when it released. They're scrambling to release content in the first week to appease people who'd already seen everything after their first 40 hours with the game. I guess 40 hours is a lot of time, to be fair. But it also was buggy and crashing, and performance was an issue. After the initial performance patches that improved some people's performance, it made it worse for me. My frame rates were worse, and I was crashing 2 or 3 times a session. The thing is, the comments were full of people telling me that I was wrong, that I was biased, that this just wasn't true, that Darktide wasn't as bad as this. However, they've just issued an open letter to their community and to the fans saying that they have let people down, and they're striving to fix that. I think that's very funny. I feel very vindicated. It's part of the reason to make this video. Polygon even mentioned that but the game is off to a hell of a start. If you actually click through on this article here, hell of a start, poised to bottle lightning again, but then the last couple of paragraphs talking about the repetition, the lack of content, and the issues around performance and crashing. Like, hell of a start, sure, but part of that hell is not being able to fucking play because you crashed a desktop. But once we get past that, Darktide is fucking sick. Again, it's up there with Hired Gun in terms of making you feel like, at least from an environmental standpoint, you are in the dingy, dark future of a hive world within the 41st millennium. Both of them also move away from the battlefields and the space marines to show us humans dealing with threats like chaos and the machinations of evil men, I guess, and women, I guess. Who are the bad guys in Necromunda? Just other people being shitheads. I would not recommend Darktide. I mean, it's on Game Pass, so if you've got Game Pass, download it and play it, and you will have fun. It's almost impossible not to have fun, except for when your games crash on the desktop. Problem is, if you've got Game Pass, don't try and play with the people who pre-ordered it on Steam like I did, because there's no cross-platform play. I recently started playing some Fortnite, and I've been smashed by children playing like PlayStation, Xbox. I saw some guy on mobile absolutely ruined me. I'm not sure if I got that vibe, but he's playing on mobile. Cross-platform play across every platform. Meanwhile, Darktide can't even get you to play cross-platform. Steam, Boxing, Game Pass. That is insanity. My last suggestion here is that they didn't include Mechanicus, another XCOM game, but it's unique enough compared to normal XCOM to be worth playing even if you're bored shitless of XCOM games. You are the Mechanicus, you're raiding a tomb world, there's an urgency to your actions within each mission as you plod through the realms underneath these ancient crypts, as you look for archaeotech and uncover what's in there, the ancient evils beneath, which is the Necrons in this case. How this was on the list is wild. Anyway, there's my don't play these but play these video. I just thought the Polygon article only touched upon kind of the cliff notes, the expected stuff, and then a weird one of an ancient copy of Chaos Gate, and I think there's better games out there for you to try. I've been Vince, also Sponsored on the internet. Thank you for watching. Smash that like button, don't forget to ring that bell. I'm sorry to the guys and people at Polygon, but I'm sorry, I just didn't think you gave us enough of an in-look into 40k. There's so much more interesting stuff out there than Darktide and Dawn of War. I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.